Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me? All right,
Yes.
we're ready. Let's go.
Let's go.
So, Soleil, you may have to take Kevin's role.
That's fine.
Okay, we're ready to go. You're live. Ellen.
Yes, you want me to start?
You're up.
All right, all right. Hey, I wanted to thank everybody for being here today. I'm Ellen Nash, the chair of the San Diego chapter of BAPAC, and this is a historic forum. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule, and our goal today is that we will all leave as voters informed, and we'll do a lot more research on these wonderful 10 candidates vying for 5 seats. That is amazing. So I want to first thank our co-sponsors, the San Diego Central Black Chamber. Donna DeBerry is the president. Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego, where Buki Domingo serves as president. The Urban Collaborative, where Barry Pollard serves as president. The Pillars of the Community with Paul Khalid and Layla Aziz, and Black Employees Association, Greg Woods is the president, and the American Civil Liberties Union Foundation of Imperial County in San Diego, where Norma is the president. And thanks to Attorney Christy Hill for accommodating with some of the questions. Also, I want to thank Generation Justice, Amika Blake, as president of that particular organization. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Dennis Cartwright of DCA Associates as our media technician. I just wanted to say thank you to our co-sponsors for providing questions and support. And we had over 100 questions sent in. And obviously we're not going to get through 100 questions with 10 candidates, but we're going to do our best to get through some powerful questions that will leave us with some takeaways on what their positions are, their platforms are. And I want to give a shout out to this wonderful forums committee that we put together for BAPAC under the leadership of Brian Fletcher, and he will introduce the committee. But I want again to thank all of the candidates for showing up. I want to thank you for just stepping out and running for office. That takes a lot. And we appreciate, we understand we see your passion and love for San Diego. And under your leadership, at least 5 of you and the rest of you as well, we're gonna make San Diego a great place. It will take it to the next level and making it San Diego the country's finest city. And thank you again for being here. I'm gonna turn it over to Brian Fletcher. Let's get going into the questions and just take it away. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ellen. Before we begin, I, along with the BAPAC family, would like to take a moment to honor the life and legacy of Congressman and civil rights giant John Lewis, who passed away yesterday at the age of 80. The son of a sharecropper, he was a 30-year U.S. House of Representative of the same state in which his father tilled the soil, and the last surviving speaker at the historical 1963 March on Washington. Congressman Lewis was a man who dared to jump in the current, a river, a long and winding river, whose undercurrents of inequity unfortunately continue to this day. But he was convinced at an early age that this river, this arc, as Dr. King characterized it, bends towards justice and cannot be stopped. Let us all be convinced, like Congressman John Lewis. We remember Congressman Lewis today and forever, and we pray for his family while renewing our commitment to continuing his legacy of service. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Soleil to start us off.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, everyone. My name is Soleil Wallenbaum-Mir. I'm a member of the Campaign Forum Committee, and thank you all again for joining us. This forum will give all voters, particularly in the Black community, the opportunity to hear from candidates running for the San Diego City Council. In numerical order by district, the candidates are District 1, Will Moore and Joe LaCava. District 3, Tony Duran and Stephen Whitburn. District 5, Marnie Von Wilpert and Joe Leventhal. District 7, Noli Souza and Raul Campillo. District 9, Sean Elo Rivera and Kelvin Barrios. The BAPAC San Diego Candidate Forum Committee interviewed local subject matter experts to compile the questions that will be asked, and there will also be questions submitted by the audience. The committee would like to give thanks to the subject matter experts and the audience for their contribution to this event. Also, the committee would like to give a special thanks to BAPAC San Diego Chair Ellen Nash and Vice Chair Elise Pipkin-Allen for their extraordinary work in making this event possible. Regarding the format, the candidates will have 1 minute for their opening statements, 1 minute for responses, and 1 minute for closing statements. The moderators for today's forum will be the Campaign Forum Committee Chair, Brian J. Fletcher, fellow committee member Kevin White, and myself, committee member Soleil Wallenbaum-Mir. Now I will turn it over to Kevin. Kevin?
Thank you. I'd like to start with the candidate introductions, and remember they're a minute, and we'd like to start number one with Marnie Von Wilpert.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Marnie Von Wilpert. I'm running for San Diego City Council in District 5. It's good to see you all here, including my friend Joe, who's running with me. I hope you're okay and your family's okay. But I am a San Diego native. I grew up in Scripps Ranch, and I'm now a deputy city attorney for the city of San Diego, where I hold environmental polluters accountable. I'm actually going after the opioid industry for all the harm and addiction they have caused. And I go after folks who harm senior citizens and right now the COVID scammers. But before I became a city attorney, I served in the Peace Corps in Botswana as a social worker. I then moved to Mississippi when I became a lawyer, and I was a civil rights lawyer in the Deep South for 3 years. I worked for the Obama administration in DC, but I couldn't work for the current administration. And so I quit my job and came home to San Diego, and I've been practicing law here ever since. I am running for city council because I believe in this town. I want to make it a better place for all. We need to ensure that we protect our planet and everyone here has a healthy and safe environment. I'm running because we need to make sure everyone can afford to put a roof over their heads and access to good jobs. And I'm running because I believe everyone should be treated with dignity, equality, and respect. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Joe Leventhal.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you, BAPAC, for organizing this forum today. These are 10 great candidates, and Marnie, great to see you as well. I wish we could see each other in person like we were able to in the primary. I'm running for San Diego City Council District 5 because of my role as a husband, as a parent. My 3 children are 12, 11, and 9 right now. I'm a business attorney. I'm a partner at a national law firm. I'm also on the 18-member board of directors and on the finance committee. And I'm the former ethics commissioner for the city of San Diego. And I'm running because I care so much about our community. I care about the city of San Diego and the region more generally. My wife and I chose this community as the place to buy our first home, as the place to raise our children, and as the place to start my business 8 years ago. And because of that, I've spent hundreds of hours a year committed to our community over the last several years. For example, I've actually spent quite a bit of time focused on racial and ethnic inequality in our community's justice system over the last several years. I focused on the disability community here in San Diego. Kids with disabilities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Okay, Noli Sosa.
Hi, everybody.
Noli
Sosa running for District 7. It's good to see everybody. A little bit about me. I've been a resident of my community here in San Diego for 30 years. I went to underground law school at the University of San Diego. And for 3 decades, I've served on 20 different boards, commissions, and organizations with the city of San Diego. I'm also a small business owner. Me and my partners have 4 restaurants in San Diego called Dirty Birds. We employ almost 150 San Diegans. I'm very proud of that. So The reason why I'm running is I want to continue my public and community service. This is something that I'm passionate about, is serving the community and coming up with new solutions, out-of-the-box solutions, and just real passionate about serving low-income San Diegans, which I've been doing. I have a record of doing that, and I want to continue that, and also provide a balance on city council, which is much needed, and a voice for small businesses and to help the economy grow. Thank you.
All right. Next, Raul Campillo.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raul Campillo. I'm running for San Diego City Council District 7, which includes Mission Valley, Linda Vista, Serra Mesa, Tierra Santa, San Carlos, Del Cerro, Allied Gardens, and Grantville. A native from San Diego, I grew up in East County, San Diego, and went to the University of San Diego High School in Linda Vista. I'm an attorney. I'm now a deputy city attorney like my friend Marnie, but I'm in the criminal division, where currently I'm one of 3 attorneys working in the gun violence response unit. And so unfortunately, for the past several months, we have been working overtime because COVID has led to a lot more a breakdown in our social fabric that's led to gun violence, whether it's domestic violence, mental health issues, suicidal issues. And so I'm proud to be serving in the city attorney's office on that issue. My main issues that I've been focusing on since the beginning of the campaign have been making sure we have affordable units throughout District 7, whether they're homes or apartments, making sure that we can clean up the San Diego River, improve our environment, and expanding transit options throughout. And I thank you for your time. Look forward to taking your questions.
Thank you, Raul. Next, we have Tony Duran.
Hello.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you all for having us. My name is Tony Duran. I'm running for San Diego City Council here in District 3, which is your central San Diego area. I was born in East LA. My family moved around quite a bit, but back in 2007, I finally made it back to Southern California, and I've made it my home. I'm here in North Park. Welcome to my condo. And I'm doing this work because this community means so much to me. It's my heart, it's my soul. I've put in a lot of my time volunteering in the community. And then I actually got the great privilege of working for Senator Toni Atkins in her Assembly and Senate offices. And that's been almost 7 years now. And for about 5 of that, a little bit more, I've represented the neighborhoods of District 3. And I want to continue to do that in a bigger way to help make sure that our district is more equitable, and to see that, so people can see that there's someone just like them that can be running for office and serve. So
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, next we have Stephen Whitburn.
Well, hi, everyone. I'm Stephen Whitburn. Along with Tony, I'm running to be the next council member for District 3. Thank you very much for your interest in our ideas for making San Diego a city in which everybody is treated equitably. And thank you very much to BayPAC for arranging this forum this afternoon. District 3 includes downtown, Balboa Park, and the neighborhoods all around it. We have about 11,000 Black residents. In fact, we have the 3rd highest Black population in the city of San Diego. After District 4 and District 9. We were home to some of the city's largest protests following the murder of George Floyd. We are an engaged district, and we are a progressive district. And I know that the majority of District 3 residents join me in prioritizing racial justice, and I look forward to partnering with you to achieve that. It's great to be with you today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Next, we have Sean Elo-Rivera. Sean?
Good afternoon, everyone. BayPAC, thank you so much for doing this. Brian, I just want to appreciate your very moving acknowledgement of Mr. Lewis. He's a hero of mine as well, and I feel you. I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a husband. I am fueled by love. I come from a multi-ethnic, multi-religious family that rode an up and down roller coaster in and out of the middle class. That shapes my worldview. As a professional, I went to law school. I'm a trained lawyer, but I'm an organizer. I currently serve as the executive director of an organization called Youth Will, where I work with young people to create the change that they want to see in the world. I also serve as an elected member of the San Diego Community College Board, where we fight to increase access to education for everyone in our community. This job is super important. I'm running because I love my community and because I want to see change. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kelvin Barrios. Kelvin?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kelvin Barrios. I'm a candidate for San Diego City Council in District 9. want to thank you for the opportunity, BayPAC, to be here with you today and all of your members. I really look forward to having a conversation about the issues impacting District 9. But before I talk about anything else, I do want to address something that some of you may know. Nearly a decade ago, I said the N-word in a conversation with a friend of mine on social media, and I'm truly sorry for that. I want to apologize because I know what I said was wrong. I'm not here to ask you for your forgiveness, but I am here to let you know that I will make sure that I use my platform, my privilege to make sure we tackle and dismantle systemic racism. It's an issue that is important to me. It's something that I've learned, I've reformed on. I would like to talk to you a little bit more about me growing up in the district, growing up in City Heights, and the issues that we faced, youth still face today growing up here. But I really look forward to today's conversation and discussion with you all, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Calvin. Next, we have Will Moore. Will?
Hi, everybody. I'm Will Moore. I'm running for City Council District 1 in San Diego, which is the Carmel Valley, La Jolla, and University City area. I want to talk a little bit about where I'm from. I'm a Columbia Law School trained attorney. I help make business deals. I've been running my own law firm here in San Diego for the last decade and a half, been very active in the community. Where I'm from, however, is a little town called Macon, Georgia, where my little brother and I were the only white kids in a black neighborhood. With Central High School, which is probably, with all my education, the place I learned the most in the world. After I graduated from Georgia Tech, where I went on scholarship, I went to West Africa and joined the Peace Corps. I now speak French and Wolof. Those aren't very useful here. Went to Columbia Law, and my first two jobs as an attorney were in all black offices where my supervisors were Sisters of Delta Sigma Theta. So I have a long history of experience in the black community. And the first organization that I joined when I moved to San Diego was the Urban League, where I served on the board of the Young Professionals of the Urban League. This community is near and dear to my heart. It is my heart, and I hope to serve in a way that no other District 1 representative ever has.
Well, thank you. And last but not least, we'd like Joe LaCava.
Well, thank you, and thank you to BayPAC for hosting this event, especially on this auspicious day between the loss of John Lewis, the murder of George Floyd, the pandemic, and the issues that have plagued the African-American community for so many years. I am running for District 1 as well, Barbara Bree's seat. I am a native San Diegan, 35 years here in the district, the son of immigrants from Italy, grew up in Logan Heights, which is now Barrio Logan. The reason that I'm running, having served for nearly 20 years as a community leader and activist, and having served on nearly 30 boards and commissions, is my frustration that the City Hall continues to kick the can down the road on so many important issues. And I'm tired of being a volunteer and wasting my time, want to get in there and make real change at City Hall. Great example is the Police Community Relations Board, where I served vice chair to Brian Pollard, where we tried to make police reform 2 years ago and finally getting traction today. I hope to continue that work at City Council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joe. I'd like to turn it over to Soleil.
Thank you, Kevin. So for the first question of today, at the time you are sworn in, it is anticipated that the impacts of COVID-19 will still be with us. What do you feel should be the city's #1 priority to begin restoring the economy, particularly for those communities and industries most impacted? We're going to start off with Marnie von Wilpert.
Oh.
Thank you again for organizing this forum to BayPAC. I appreciate you inviting us. And I agree with you. The impact of the pandemic is one of the biggest issues facing our city. And as we know, the pandemic has hit communities of color much worse, especially Black communities. But that's because Black communities have traditionally been underserved in healthcare and in education and all of the things that make them more at risk. So I think we need to address that when we start to address it as a city. But this is actually the second epidemic I've been through. I served in the Peace Corps in Sub-Saharan Africa during the AIDS epidemic. And I've done contact tracing and testing, and I know why it works, so that we can hit hot spots and keep other spots open. So we need to do a much better job with our public health system in general. And I pledge to work with the county to do that. And in terms of the economic recovery, I think we have to support our local businesses, get people back to work, figure out a good place for children to go. If schools can't open, we have to talk about daycare. And we need to make sure that everyone has a chance to thrive. So I'm glad that Monica Montgomery has the Office of Racial Equity that finally got approved by City Council so that we can make sure when we do contracting or hand out CARES Act money or other things that Black communities get their fair share.
Thank you, Marnie. And then Joel Leventhal.
Thank you. I think this is a very important issue. You're right. COVID will still be with us, unfortunately, when we're all, or half of us are sworn in. And, I think it's something that I've been focused on for quite a while. We need to look at how San Diego gets what I call more than its fair share of tourism dollars as the tourism industry starts to return. We need to look at ways that the City Council can use its Federal CARES Act dollars to help things like the port and the airport so that we get more people here spending their money at our local small businesses, our local restaurants, things like that. Walmart, Costco, Target, those are not hurting. It's the small businesses, and we're a small business economy. I also wrote an op-ed a few weeks ago. The City Council, I believe, should have spent a significant amount of the Federal CARES Act money on our schools so that our students could go back to school if parents chose in a safe environment so that people could actually go back to work. It is hurting our economy, it's hurting workers, and we need to do what we can as a City Council.
Thank you, Joe. Noli Souza.
Yes, I'm one of those small business owners that has been tremendously impacted by COVID-19. My 4 restaurants, me and my partner's 4 restaurants, we had to furlough over 100 of our employees. Our business was down 85%, and we're barely struggling. A lot of small businesses are struggling, and the reason why, it just doesn't impact us small business owners, but also our employees, which you see unemployment going up, but it's also hurting our sales tax revenues that are coming into the city. And this is going to impact everybody in the city, where your favorite neighborhood programs, our libraries, our recreation centers, how to keep our as many police officers and firefighters on the streets and our other city employees, that's at risk if we don't get our small businesses back on our feet and we stop the bleeding that's happening right now where they're closing. So that's going to be my main priority, is making sure that we revive our small business community and the jobs that it comes with.
Thank you, Noli. We're going to move forward to Raul Campillo.
Yes, so the top priority that I see as we come in with COVID still affecting us so deeply is keeping people in their homes. We have to continue to extend the eviction moratorium as long as we can, because if people aren't able to stay in their home, they're going to have to start choosing between food and shelter or transportation and getting to work. If we can make sure people have a stable home situation as best as possible, they can continue to spend their money at local businesses and keep the economic cycle running as best as they can. So if for me, I'm saying we will suffer health-wise, economically, and educationally if people can't stay in their homes. If children who do have access to a computer and internet can't log in for their remote education going into the fall, of course, we have to continue to expand those technological and internet access for all communities that still don't have it. But we're going to start to see a breakdown in every single sector if people are being evicted. So that would be my top focus.
Thank you, Raul. And then we're going to move forward to Kelvin Barrios.
I think, we're actually going to be facing not just a COVID-19 recovery, but some bad fiscal year ahead of us. I worked at City Council. I was a policy advisor for Council President Georgia Gomez. I know how our budget cycle works. I know this is not going to be easy, but I do think it's important while we're having these conversations of ensuring that we're doing an economic recovery plan, that we're looking at those that have been impacted the highest of this. In District 9, we have some of the highest zip codes of unemployment rates right now. Yes, we need to support our small business community. We need to support our tourism community, ensure that we're doing this safely, that we're opening up the economy safely. But really, it's like talking about the folks that are most impacted. We have older folks, folks with disabilities that, businesses may not want to hire back now. Like, where we need to be looking out for those folks and ensuring that businesses are bringing back the same type of workforce and they're not trying to nitpick and choose who comes back in that sense. So I think jobs, economic opportunity, economic development needs to be what we talk about, but do it through an equity lens too. It's like we have my community where I live in City Heights is greatly affected by this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Sean Ella Rivera.
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is super important. Marnie started to touch on this, but the inequities that we see as far as impact are not happenstance. It's not a random situation that we see the impact being so disproportionately applied to the Black community and other communities of color. It's the product of centuries of oppression and intentional oppression. So we have to know that we're not going to fix or account for any of those without being very intentional about it. In my day job, I work with young people. Every time we decide to choose a campaign, we use a racial justice and equity lens. At the community college district, on Thursday, we passed a new set of board goals, and the entire document is filtered through the lens of pursuing racial equity and justice. I say that, I start with that because we have to have that framework when we do this work. I think Raul made a very good point. Housing, keeping folks in their homes is going to be a top priority, and then making policy decisions that provide automatic triggers for the safety mechanisms that we know the community needs. But all of that has to start with a racial justice and equity lens.
Thank you, Sean. And Will Moore?
I think the number one thing we need to do is beat the virus, because if we don't do that, then we're never going to open everything up. We're going to follow this cycle of going open and closed and open and closed, and we could get ourselves out 3 years out until we get a vaccine. We don't know when that's going to happen. My friends and neighbors who work in the biotech sector here, up just in the condo complex I live in, tell me that there's no way the first one is less than 6 months away, even the first attempt. So we need to make sure we beat this thing in the community and don't wait for the vaccines to solve the problem for us. I'm a small business lawyer. Our small businesses and our service workers have been devastated by this thing. We need to figure out ways to keep people in their homes, and we need to make sure that the number one issue affecting our kids in this thing is the digital divide. We need to make sure we get broadband and library access to every kid in this town so that they don't have to take an entire year off of learning in order to just survive the epidemic. So small businesses, service workers, and digital divide.
Thank you, Will. And Joe LaCava?
Yeah, great question. The small business owners that I talk to talk over and over again about the lack of predictability. Small business and large business depends on having a reasonable, foreseeable future by which they can put a business plan and operationalize that. The messages have been mixed, and it's been a tough one because the impact of the virus on our communities has been so diverse and changing daily, primarily because we have had the lack of testing and we've had the lack of people conforming to the kinds of things that need to be done to start to build that herd community. The vaccine will certainly be a large part of that. I think we need to start having the large conversations that if we're going to set money aside, we have to dedicate that to those that are most heavily impacted and not just make it first come, first serve as we currently hear. We have to figure out how to get the money for those that have been avoided eviction and are going to have a huge rent bill. We got to have that conversation today so that we're ready to move when the time comes.
Thank you, Joe. Tony Duran?
Thank you so much for that question. I still work in the state office, and I work with folks every single day, all day long, that have been unemployed since March, that are still waiting for their unemployment to come through. So I think we all have seen, a lot of us have known for a long time that the system is broken, and more people are seeing now just how broken that system is, how the fact that we wait, we kick that can down the road, we'll deal with something later, and then later comes, and we don't know what's going to happen. So living in the time of COVID-19, we don't know from day to day what's going to happen. We have policy changes on what seems like a weekly basis, but we've also seen that when we see that we have to do something to make sure that we're taking care of our residents and our businesses and our workers, that we can get it done right away. So part of it is we continue doing that every single day, not just when we're in office.
Thank you, Tony. And then finally, Stephen Whitburn.
It has to start with health. You can't flourish economically unless you're healthy and unless your employees are healthy. Prior to this, I had the privilege of serving as the director of the American Cancer Society for Southern California. And there are tremendous disparities in healthcare as it applies to treatment and diagnosis of cancer. We're seeing the same thing regarding the treatment and diagnosis of COVID-19 in our communities. And we have to address those racial disparities if we're going to have an equitable recovery from COVID-19. Once we do that, I very much hope that Councilmember Monica Montgomery's Office on Race and Equity, which she got through the City Council, will help to ensure that the economic distribution following this crisis is equitably distributed. I will certainly be an advocate for that on the City Council. And ultimately, we need to attract more business to San Diego to lift all boats. And to bring more business into San Diego, we're going to have to provide more housing, particularly more affordable housing, so that workers can afford to live in this city.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you all for your responses to that question. Keeping all of those responses in mind, the follow-up is, are you willing to extend the eviction moratoriums that were put in place? And for the sake of time, if you could please give a short yes or no response. We're going to start off with Joe Leventhal.
No, I don't think we're extending the eviction moratorium. As was mentioned earlier, the problem with the eviction moratorium is people are still going to have to pay their back rent. And so until we figure out how people aren't going to get saddled with a huge multi-month bill for their rent, I don't support policies that compound that problem and make it more difficult.
Thank you, Joe. Marnie Von Wilpert.
Yes, I do support extending an eviction moratorium along with making sure that landlords are able to get paid. We need both to figure out this problem. Most people don't know this, but I actually am a city attorney who is working on enforcing the eviction moratorium, and I get more calls from small business owners than I do from tenants. A lot of small business owners are also protected by the eviction moratorium, and that's the majority of the questions that I get. So I'm glad that the city actually invested CARES Act money into a tenant relief program so that they can stay in their homes, landlords can get paid until we figure this pandemic out.
Thank you, Marnie. Raul Campillo.
Yes, I do. It was the first thing out of my mouth on the previous question. Of course, the issue of making sure that those who rely on a tenant's rent to pay their bills and deal with the issues going on in their lives, landlords are business owners as well. We have to work with our state, with our county, federal government to make sure that funds are there to make sure that the stress is not passed off onto them. But right now, we got to keep people in their homes for the sake of the health of the community, which then expands into education, business, economics, and our social fabric.
Thank you, Raul. Noli Souza.
As long as it includes commercial properties, we've had problems paying our rent at our locations. So it can't go on indefinitely. We can't keep kicking the can down the road because we're headed to a disaster if we just people can't pay their mortgages. So it can't go on indefinitely, but for the time being, it includes commercial properties. I'm okay with it right now.
Thank you, Noli. Sean Ella Rivera.
Thank you. I apologize if you hear some bells. That's the Palatero in the neighborhood because City Heights. So in terms of the moratorium, we've got to keep people in their homes. I know what it feels like to be in a family that's been evicted. I've seen my family evicted from multiple properties, and it upends an entire family and makes everything about life more difficult. And in a pandemic, puts lives in jeopardy. At the same time, we can't do so in such a way that doesn't take into account the impacts on landlords. The last thing that we want is smaller landlords of a few properties being swallowed up by corporate landlords who will have no sympathy at all for the renters there. That'll just make the problem worse. So yes, with the necessary protections to make sure the landlords are whole.
Thank you, Sean. Kelvin Barrios.
Yes, actually, I've been working with Council President Jorge Gomez when this came originally to the city on pushing and lobbying for the support and talking to residents in the district on ensuring that landlords were telling them, it's like, oh, no, you're going to get evicted. You need to move out now, and just getting information out there. So yes, on the extension, but we need to do better. There isn't a big enough relief program that was passed by the city. We really feel they failed on that. We had an opportunity to do something what Chris Ward was proposing, something along the lines of $70 million. And instead we got, less than a third of that, if even a fourth of that. So I would want to see these two things brought forth together, and along with an education campaign, so tenants know that they have these protections and know how to get access to these funds, and it's in the languages that they speak and being able to access that. I believe that's important.
Thank you, Kelvin. Joe LaCava?
Great question. A lot of people have given the answer, but I would extend the eviction. These are extraordinary times and they require extraordinary measures. As others have said, we have to keep people in their homes. It's the safest place for them, and it's the safest place for the recovery to begin. Oddly, I think this is one time where corporate landlords have a little more capacity to be sympathetic and accommodate this. Those small landlords, as Sean pointed out, I think are also going to be at risk. The program does have to extend to both residential as well as commercial, so our small businesses can thrive. And we need to start preparing now for what's going to eventually happen when the virus is taken care of and people can begin to pay rent again, and how we take care of those past due bills. Today is the day for the conversation.
Thank you, Joe. Will Moore?
I would support an extension of the eviction moratorium during an emergency period. Only, listen, they got us down here like crabs in a bucket in San Diego. All those big banks are making us pay all of those mortgage rates. The landlords and the tenants are all sending that money all out to New York City. And our community is having to fight with each other over how that damage is going to be distributed when the entire economy is shut down. But those guys are getting paid over there. So they got us fighting with each other. I would rather not play that game, but we're going to have to figure out a way where we all take care of each other, and our good landlords are taken care of, and the folks that are less willing and less able to work with their tenants aren't putting people out on the street, because we need to beat this virus. And if you have a lot of people becoming homeless, you're not going to be able to beat the virus, and that's going to cost us all more money.
Thank you, Will. Stephen Whitburn?
We must extend the moratorium, both residential and commercial. Nobody should be forced out of their home because of a circumstance they can't control. Nobody should be forced to close and shut down their business because of a circumstance they can't control. Nothing could be more devastating to somebody in their life and their prospects for the future. So we must extend it. There are measures under consideration in the legislature that would not only protect residents, but also landlords and businesses. And I think that's the right way to go.
Thank you, Stephen. And finally, Tony Duran.
Yes, like I said, I talk to people every day that are in these terrible situations. The first thing they tell me about the fact that they don't have any income, the first thing that they say is, I need to pay my rent. And the fact that is the thing in the forefront of their mind, because they don't want to become homeless, they don't want their families to become homeless. That is exactly why we do need to extend the moratorium. Make sure that the city council is doing everything that they can to address these issues for residents and for our small businesses, and also support bills that we currently have in the legislature and changes that will come to the state budget, and also holding our federal government accountable, because we have folks that do not have income by no fault of their own. Some of us have it and can still pay, but we need to be watching out for folks, because it's not just health, it's also mental health we're talking about.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you all for those great responses. We're going to go ahead and give it on over to Brian for the next question.
Thank you, Soleil. The City Council recently voted to place a measure on the November ballot that would make both the primary and the general election for school board district-only contests. Do you support this measure? Why or why not? We'll start off with Will Moore.
Yes, because it's fair.
Joe LaCava?
Yes, I've supported that. I've noticed that we've been making an effort to go around the city and convert every city to district elections. And I think that is the right thing to do, and I'll be voting in support of that ballot measure.
Thank you. Tony Duran?
Yes, absolutely. We need to be voting for people that represent the areas that we live in, not outside voters for for something that doesn't reflect them.
Thank you. Stephen Whitburn?
Yes, I support district-only elections for the San Diego School Board. I'm sure as most of our viewers this afternoon are aware, the initial vote in the primary for school board is at the district level, but then the general election vote is a district-wide vote. That district-wide vote requires a candidate to have much more money, and it gives the entire city say on the school board member for a specific neighborhood. I believe that parents in a neighborhood have a right to have more say in the school board member that is responsible for their children's education. So I think that the election needs to be at the district level, both in the primary and in the general election.
Thank you. Marnie von Wilpert?
Yes, I support the ballot measure. I would vote in favor of making sure that school district elections or school board elections are at the district level. We need to make sure, like Stephen said, that parents are able to elect people in their communities to represent themselves and their families and their schools.
Thank you. Joe Leventhal?
Yes, I've long supported district-only elections for the San Diego Unified School District. Those races, as Stephen mentioned, it's important for the representatives, the elected representatives, to be responsive to their communities. That happens more at the district level than it does when people are elected citywide. And there are obviously great disparities from region to region. And it's important that we have people that are looking at their constituents, at those disparities, and making sure they're advocating for their communities. So I've long supported district-only elections.
Thank you. Noli Zosa?
Yes, for all the above reasons that all the other candidates have articulated, very strongly in support of that.
Thank you. Raul Campillo?
Yes, sir. I definitely support district-only elections for the same reason it was good for the city of San Diego city council districts to improve diversity and make sure that there's responsiveness to the individual neighborhoods within each district. This is going to do the same exact thing for San Diego Unified.
Thank you. Kelvin Barrios?
I want to say it's about time, honestly. This has been an issue. A little background of 4 years ago, I was helping out Lachey Collins in her quest to get onto the school board, and she won overwhelmingly in her district, and then was defeated in the general election when it was a citywide vote. Same thing 4 years ago as well. It's like I was helping out Elise Pipkin-Allen when she was trying to get community representation, actual representation by the district that she wanted to represent. And again, was pushed out because it was going to become a citywide vote. We need a district representation. I think we need to expand it, not just from the school board, but community college, all type of boards. It's really important for folks to know who's representing them, and for folks not to shy away from their communities, right? So I'm 100% in support of this, and it's about time.
Thank you. Shanilo Rivera?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Again, sorry for the background noise. So this one, yes, we have to do it. Why? Because the current rules disenfranchise voters, especially Black voters in Southeast San Diego. We've seen that over and over again. Just to correct the record here, the San Diego Community College District, this was a priority of me when I showed up. Last year, we did this on our own. It wasn't forced upon us in any way. We decided to take action because it was a priority to me. So starting in 2022, we will have district-only elections, again, because it's right, it's fair, it's just, and we cannot be disenfranchising voters in the year 2020.
Thank you. Thank you all for your responses. I'm going to turn it back over to Kevin.
Okay, thank you. There are several upcoming projects and initiatives, including a $900 million housing bond, the San Diego State University Sports and Housing Complex, the Port of San Diego Coastal Building and Facilities Complex, and other city municipal projects that are taxpayer funded. If elected, how would you ensure that the Black business community is a full and respected participant in these upcoming projects? That's the question. I'd like to start with Sean.
Yeah, again, this as I mentioned earlier, everything has to start with this racial justice and equity lens. I'm gonna sound like I'm on repeat, because if we don't do that with intentionality, we're gonna end up in the same place we were. The disparities that we see, again, are the result of a lot of intentionality over a long period of time. What I do in my work is bring folks to the table and make sure that the parts of the community who are usually left out of the room have a deciding and decision-making role at the table. That's super important to me. The last thing I'm going to say is I think that the work that Councilmember Montgomery has done is incredible. I'm proud to have her endorsement, incredibly proud. But we have to stop pointing the finger at the one Black elected official to do all the labor of making sure that Black folks have a seat at the table. That has to end. We all have to own that burden.
Okay, thank you. Kelvin? Calvin?
Yes, I 100% agree with that as well. Honestly, for me, in my current position, I'm the Director of Community Outreach for Laborers Local 89. I know a lot of the policies at the city. I was a policy advisor at the city of San Diego. We need to do better. The city has failed the Black community as far as providing job opportunities for them. I have meetings coming up with the Black Contractors Association on seeing how we can build together, how we can actually tackle these type of issues. How do we get into the schools? How does labor also, fight for that and align ourselves? We talk a lot about, hiring and, specific zip codes and hiring in disadvantaged communities, but what other work is being done there? Because we're failing. We're really failing at those opportunities. And I'm going to be a fierce advocate for that, to provide job opportunities to people of color, to local folks, so they can improve their lives.
Okay, thank you. Joe LaCava.
I'm glad you're mixing it up. An incredibly important question to make sure. One of my priorities from the very first day of my campaign was social equity. And I made a promise to Councilmember Montgomery at a BayPAC event last year about my commitment to work with her in helping in the districts 4, 8, and 9 and the issues they face and how they have been underserved over the years. As Sean mentioned, it is not the explicit bias, it is the implicit institutional racism that we really have to confound, and is really the hardest part. We have an opportunity where they are public projects to use that leverage to do better across the entire business and residential of San Diego. And I would look to those who have the lived experience, who knows where the challenges have been, to inform me and allow me to listen, learn, and then amplify their voices and do the policy and legislative changes to actually make that happen. It's not about talk, it's about action. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Will Moore?
Yes, thank you. I would echo Sean's sentiment. I think he put it very well. We can't just make this Monica's problem, which is what everybody seems to want to do. We need to take action to make sure that the contractors are well represented across our community. We got small business contractors, we got Black-owned contractors, Latino-owned contractors. We also need to make sure that when those contractors come in and win bids, they aren't just straws to make to get white subs in. So we need subcontractor audits to make sure all of our EEOC obligations are being fulfilled, all of our affirmative action goals are being fulfilled. So we make sure that that money comes back into our community. We talk about racism like this thing in the past that we're hoping will heal eventually, but we are doing constant new injuries to ourselves, and we haven't fixed even the recent things. We haven't stopped doing the things we were doing to harm the community in the first place. And we need to take strong action on all of those points, both in our public contracting and in our rules as relates to the private sector.
Thank you. Stephen.
As a council member, it will be my responsibility to look at every decision through the lens of racial justice, and I am committed to doing that. Beyond that, I think this question is exactly where the Office on Race and Equity can provide some real insight into the structural racism that has resulted in social inequities and economic inequities in the city of San Diego. The City Council recently funded the Office on Race and Equity. I think, frankly, that it's going to require much more funding if it is going to be able to do a robust job of rooting out inequities in the city of San Diego, and I'm committed to providing it the funding necessary to truly advance racial justice in the city of San Diego.
Thank you, Stephen. Tony, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. So we've known for a long time, especially me as a woman and as a person of color, that we've been deprived in a level playing field for far too long. And Assemblymember Dr. Shirley Weber worked very hard to make sure that we passed ACA 5 in the state legislature. So not only are we voting for these particular things that you mentioned on the November ballot, but we're also going to vote in November to restore affirmative action, because we do need to make sure that there is a level playing field. And it's going to be our role as city council members, as citizens, and also as coalition builders to make sure that these aren't just votes for votes, but that we're actually implementing and making sure that we are addressing this, the racial disparities that we see.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Can we have Joe Leventhal next?
Thank you very much. I think there's two aspects I'd like to answer this question. One, and I certainly differ with some of the candidates here, I generally oppose the project labor agreement requirement in the city for contracting. And I think part of the reason is because it doesn't have an equal playing field for all contractors. And it makes it difficult for Black-owned and other minority-owned small businesses to compete for city contracts. I've been endorsed by the AGC, which recently partnered with the Black Contractors Association, in large part because of the AGC's position in fighting project labor agreements. But I also think it's important where we spend those dollars. It's part of the reason I've advocated for a while that phase 3 of the Pure Water project, which is actually in the southern part of the county, go forward before phase 2, because we need to make sure we're providing those job opportunities in the historically disadvantaged areas of our community.
Okay, thank you. Marie?
So I strongly agree that we need to take a look at our contracting practices and making sure that minority-owned companies are getting their fair share of contracts in the city, and that that's why I support Monica Montgomery's Office of Racial Equity, and making sure that we look at system-wide, because I agree it's not up to Monica, but it's up to us to support her. And systematic racism throughout a lot of our institutions in our city, I believe, is the reason that a lot of minority contractors aren't getting contracts that they should. I don't think it's a project labor agreement issue. I think it's because we haven't addressed systematic racism in a lot of our institutions. So I want to lead a campaign that talks about bringing everyone together and uniting folks so that we actually can have every voice at the table and lift each other up and get things done together.
Thank you, Marie. Raul?
Yeah, thanks. This is a great question. I think at the core of this, we have to start at, let's just looking at the specific projects that you laid out for us. The housing bond, SDSU West, the Port of San Diego facility. And we have to say, when those projects were being imagined, when the initiatives were being written, were there people of color included at the table as those projects were being discussed about not just how is it going to be built, but is it going to positively impact each community that's going to be a part of using the services that come through that? And so, like everyone's sort of saying, it starts before the contracting even begins. And so I think that when it comes to building big projects like this, we have to ensure there's more community input, and specifically communities of color. It also begins with the planning groups. I think one thing we all know is that planning groups are lacking in diversity. And I think if we improve those parts of the imagination of the projects, a lot of contacts will be made, a lot more community input will be put there. And then over time, that's going to bring to the table more that's going to create space and time for workers from communities of color.
Okay, thank you very much. Noli?
Yes, I've actually done the work, not just talked about it. One thing that's missing right now is how minority small businesses or businesses can get up to the level where they can compete for city contracts. So what I've been doing in Linda Vista, we partnered with the University of San Diego and worked with their School of Business to work with minority-owned businesses, especially my community in Linda Vista, to get them for the professors and the staff to work with small business owners to get their operational practices, their marketing practices, and their logistical abilities up to the levels where they can compete for city contracts. That's the key, is to make sure that these minority-owned businesses can compete for city contracts. Right now, if they're too small or their level of business practices aren't to that level where they can't qualify for city contracts. So that's what I've done, using work with great institutions like universities to make sure, and work with small businesses to make sure that they compete and get these city contracts. That's the solution, and that's what I've been working on for years.
Okay.
Let's walk the walk and not just talk the talk, and that's what I've been doing. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I'd like to turn it back over to Soleil to continue.
Thank you, Kevin. So the San Diego City Council has released about 1% or less of contract dollars to Black-owned businesses, contractors, suppliers, vendors, consultants, etc. If elected to the San Diego City Council, what is your plan to improve those numbers? We're going to start with Tony Duran.
All right, well, thank you. Just like I was saying before, we have a broken system, and it's our duty to fix that system, to work with Black businesses, to work with groups that that know better than we do. I'm not a Black person, so I don't know how everything how things have affected you directly. And when we say Black Lives Matter, we have to also say Black votes matter, and Black businesses matter, and Black voices matter. And so I'm gonna make sure that I have those voices with me at the table to make sure that 1% is not okay. It needs to be much higher, and we will get there.
Thank you, Tony. Stephen Whitburn.
I would approach that in two ways. That tremendous disparity is a classic example of structural racism. It is a result of the inequities that the Black community and Black businesses have faced in this city over the years. And the inadequate ability to participate is a part of that. So we need to understand why that is. What are the causes of it? And that is one of the chief purposes of the Office on Race and Equity, is to really understand why our city departments are yielding these results and uncover the steps that are going to be required to turn things around. So I will absolutely fund the office, support the results, and work to make those changes. But again, I think that as council members, we have a responsibility to take personal responsibility to look at the decisions that we make and ensure through a lens of racial justice that we are awarding contracts on an equitable basis. And I'm absolutely committed to seeing that happen.
Thank you, Stephen. Marnie Von Wilpert.
Yep, one thing we have to do is start measuring the problem, and that's the way that we're going to be able to fix it, and making sure we pay attention to the contracts that we put out every day. It's not just a problem at the city. We've seen with the Federal CARES Act funding and the small business loans, the PPP loans, many fewer Black businesses were awarded those relief packages than the non-Black businesses, and we need to see why and know why. And I agree, that's why we have to support going through every decision with a racial equity lens. And I'm really glad to see the Office of Race and Equity started finally, and I'm happy to keep supporting it. So thank you.
Thank you, Marnie. Joe Leventhal.
I certainly don't have all the answers, but I'd certainly be asking the question. One thing I think we need to do is better outreach. For example, I chaired a panel that helped elevate 4 new federal magistrate judges. And it was important to me that we had increased diversity with our federal judicial bench. And the way we needed to do that initially is make sure we had applicants for those federal judgeships that were diverse, that reflected the community. As a panel, we couldn't appoint someone who was diverse if they weren't self-selecting and applying. And so we reached out to diverse bar associations, for example, to make sure people were aware of the opportunity. And I think it's important that the city do more outreach to make sure Black and other minority-owned businesses are aware of the opportunities out there.
Thank you, Joe. Noli?
Yeah, this is the reason why, I'm so, I want to be on city council, so uplift other minority-owned businesses in San Diego, because if you don't understand how businesses operate and how we can get more contracts and to improve and expand businesses, and going off my last answer, you have to have these businesses really work and get them to the level where they can qualify for these large contracts with the city. So working, like I said, working with universities like like what I've been doing, the USD School of Business, and working with those, the staff members and administration, work with those minority small businesses to get them to the level that they can compete for these contracts. That's the key. It's not just complaining about the underlying, let's do something about it. Let's get these businesses those contracts, and I'm going to give them the way to be able to do that if you elect me to City Council.
Thank you, Noe. Raul?
Yeah, so I think implicit in my opponent's response there is that these businesses just can't cut it yet, and we need to get them to a higher level. I think they can cut it, and I think that the city has systemic problems, and recognizing that and opening those opportunities for them. It is a systemic issue. 1% isn't reflective of there's just not enough opportunity. It's that the opportunities aren't being given. So I think that when we say looking at things through a social equity lens, that lens has to be, let's look at the contracts that have already happened and figure out through subcontractor audits. I thought that was a great idea. Why isn't that we didn't have as many applicants? Why from the Black and brown communities? How come we haven't seen them being included or their bids being reviewed and granted as many times? And I think that means that we have to really make diversity at our core a value of the city, and say, oh, they actually can handle this job, and we just need to make sure that we give them the actual good, honest, good faith look that they deserve, and they will be awarded that. And I'm dedicated to making sure that 1% doesn't stay 1%.
Thank you, Raul. Kelvin?
You know, this is an issue, you know, caused by systemic racism. I think honestly, a big problem is the way these contracts are written, the way we're bidding out. They're made so, you know, minority-owned business or Black-owned businesses don't get them. They look at, you know, how much assets you have. So they want companies that have been established for a long time. It's like we need to look at new businesses. We need to change the way that language is written. But also include higher thresholds, like mandated thresholds. One thing that I've seen, I work amongst like the labor community, the construction community, and another issue we really need to tackle is, you know, let's be honest, let's be real. Like there is racism still embedded in the construction industry. Like we need to tackle that. We need to have real conversations. We need to drag people to the table to have these conversations, and we need to tackle it because policies are going to be good. Policies can be great, but we need to actually go after the industry in itself if they want these public dollars. One last point on that is we can do better. We must do better. There.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, so 1% should be something that embarrasses everyone who's associated with the city. So when we talk about racial justice and equity, equity requires us, you know, one, acknowledging the disparities that exist, and then making like real efforts to make amends for that, right? And so, you know, when we talk about this sort of policy, we really should be thinking about a reparations framework that actually is paying back communities for all that they've lost throughout the years, right? So I did hear Joe mention an important part, which I do think is about outreach and making sure that we're giving those opportunities there. As an executive of a nonprofit, I saw how difficult it was to access PPP funds. Super, super difficult. That was intentional. So there's a lot that we can do. The last thing that I want to say is, as a person of color myself, that we have to address anti-Blackness, because it's not good enough to say diversity. It's not good enough to say people of color. There is anti-Blackness that exists in Latino-led organizations. We've got folks from labor unions here who are blocking seats at the table for Black folks. We've got folks from other organizations that are run by people of color that are not letting Black folks at the table.
Thank you, Sean. Will Moore?
So I think San Diego needs to think about what its own history is. That 1% doesn't come from nowhere. It doesn't come from just the contracting processes. We need to do full audits of the contracting processes, full audits of the subcontracting processes. But we also need to recognize, just like Kelvin said, when you say you have to have a certain asset level, that is discriminatory, and it's discriminatory based on things San Diego has done in its past. If you were a World War II veteran coming out of that war, you want to buy a house, invest for your family in a place that's going to appreciate in a place like Claremont, you know what, white people could do that, black people couldn't. There were restrictive covenants, red lines, you couldn't get credit. And that wealth disparity between those two families, that even if they were at exactly the same point in that time, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars over that period of time. That's education, business investment, and that is what is harming our communities. So we need to recognize that when we put our requirements in, how we've harmed these communities, not just in the past, but in the way that continues up and through this very day. We need audits. We need to look at our methods for choosing contractors in a way that doesn't discriminate against people that we've harmed and put them in a position where they can't meet the requirements that now we're putting in place.
Thank you. And then finally, Joe LaCava.
Well, thank you. I'll certainly echo some of the comments that have been made by the others already. But I think a very specific example that I've seen happen down at the city is knee-jerk reactions to solve the problems of today without thinking of the consequences. And of course, this is how that institutional racism makes its way into our system. The city was frustrated with its contracting process that was too slow and inefficient. And so what did the city do? They started issuing long-term retainers so that if you want a contract today, you have that contract for the next 4 or 5 years, which blocked out a lot of good qualified companies from actually having a chance to get back into the system. It was a knee-jerk reaction to one problem, and it created other problems. We also have to make sure that we're not only looking at the dollars that are being awarded, but by the number of companies that are being awarded, so that we spread the opportunities to as many Black-owned companies and contractors as possible. And the last thing I'll say, and I know Raul took a little exception to this, but going after public projects is really a bureaucratic nightmare. Having done that myself, we have to make it easier. We have to open the process up. Not that people can't do it, but some people may think that private work is more productive and more worth their time. You have to invest a lot of money, as others said, to go after a public project. That again creates that implicit racism in the process that we have to fix. Let's get busy. Let's make those changes now.
Thank you, Joe. We're going to go ahead and move on to Brian for the next question. Thank you guys for your responses to that.
Thank you, Soleil. Proposition 16 is a bill proposed by state legislators that will repeal California's 1996 ban on affirmative action. In the upcoming November general election, if Proposition 16 is passed, would you support a change to the San Diego City Charter to include new goals and benchmarks in the support of stronger hiring and contracting opportunities for businesses and nonprofits located in the city's underserved communities? I'll start out with Joe LaCava.
Thanks. The answer is yes. We have to start tackling this institutional racism. We can't just do the protests, raise our voices. It's gone on for far too long. We're aware of it. This is a unique moment in our history of our country and our city. Now is the time to do that. We need to maybe level the playing field for every San Diegan of every color, in every community. So let's get busy and do that.
Thank you. Will Moore?
Absolutely, I would. As kind of telegraphed by my last answer, San Diego has harmed our own community for so long that we need to not only stop doing so, which I think is the number one thing we need to stop affirmatively harming our Black community and our minority communities, but also to make up that gap that we've created, not only with affirmative action, but also with affirmative action, but by reviewing everything that we do in contracting and all of our services that discriminate against people who are suffering from exactly the harms we've done them in the past.
Thank you. Steve Whitburn?
Absolutely. Racial injustice in many cases was deliberate, and untangling that and restoring racial equity has to be a deliberate process as well. That's what affirmative action is for. I support it 100%.
Thank you. We'll move on to Tony Duran.
I'm glad you mentioned Prop 16. That's exactly what I was talking about earlier with, we've had Black folks doing the work for so long and pushing this information forward. And it's taken a global pandemic and additional murders of Black people for us to actually finally open our eyes and start saying that we're going to do something. So moving forward, this, us marching in the streets like I've done since we've been under the stay-at-home order, it can't just be the movement of the moment. This has to change. We have to be the ones to do it, and do it with our Black friends, with our Black family members, with our Black businesses. And we cannot be afraid to say that Black businesses, Black people, we've done you wrong and we need to fix it. And we're gonna do that.
Thank you. Joe Leventhal?
Thank you. In terms of the question of whether I favor the city trying to increase opportunity for disadvantaged communities, historically disadvantaged communities, I certainly do. I don't favor that based on race and ethnicity. I do favor that based on socioeconomic standing. And frankly, this may not be the majority opinion among candidates, but I am concerned about how divided we've become as a country. And I think part of that challenge is because we want to put everybody in one particular box or another. And so I am concerned about changing the way the city handles this on a basis of race and ethnicity, but I do favor that in a socioeconomic, through socioeconomic lens.
Marnie?
Okay.
Von Wilpert?
Yes, so I do support making sure that we have, like Tony said, not just a conversation in this moment, but we're having a national conversation about race and equity. And part of that is making sure that we support things like Proposition 16 and looking at the way we do things in the city and in our state, in our schools, and all of our institutions. I am actually a product of an affirmative action program. My mother benefited from affirmative action going to UCLA Business School, which is now the Anderson School, back in the 1970s. And affirmative action was not about excluding people, it was about including people. She was one of the first women to be allowed to go to UCLA Business School. They didn't have bathrooms for women. She had to use a men's bathroom. And she ended up graduating second in her class, salutatorian. She ended up working as an accountant, and then she left work to raise me and my brothers. But that's why opportunities need to exist for people who have traditionally been excluded, and we need to look at that.
Thank you. Raul Campillo?
Yes, absolutely. I support Prop 16. I think it's amazing that we're at this point in time where we're one of 8 states in the country that doesn't allow this, and we need to pass this proposition. Assemblywoman Dr. Shirley Weber said it best. We have all survived and endured Proposition 209 from the early 90s, because before that, the enrollment of African-American students at UCLA was close to 10%. And the year after Prop 209 passed, it dropped to less than 3%. That's not far off from the 1% of Black contractors that we have in San Diego getting contracts. So I'm looking at this and saying it's long past due. The structural systemic issues are in place. COVID-19 has heightened that. If anything, it's been underreported how many African-Americans and Latinos have gotten COVID. It's a serious problem. And I think that the ramification of passing Prop 16 is going to be equity in health, education, contracting, everything in our society, everything in California.
Thank you. Noli Sosa?
When I look and evaluate affirmative action, one thing I learned in college, and it always stuck with me, if you have 2 people in a race and you whack one of the people, the participants, in the knees and expect them to compete on the same level, you can't expect them to compete. And that's what's happened to African Americans throughout our history. You can't expect them to compete on the same level field when you've handicapped the odds against them. So I look at it now, and I say, and I think about the lack of, we talked about earlier, not enough minority owned businesses getting contracts, and we need to increase that number. And I would look under a strict scrutiny when I would look at any policy that evaluates race. It needs to be evaluated under strict scrutiny. And if there are 2 companies that are one of a minority and one non-minority owned, and they're both equally qualified, and I would give it to the minority-owned businesses, assuming that they're both equally qualified because of the lack of minority-owned businesses that are currently have those contracts. You need to address that. Thank you.
Thank you. Shani Love Rivera?
Yeah. So on yes, the short answer is yes. On Thursday, the San Diego Community College District voted unanimously to support Prop 16 so that we can actively be on the ballot in support of this super important measure. Look, we will not undo racism through race neutral practices. The idea that we will set up a racist system and then pull our hands back and say, now we're going to be race neutral. That is rigging the game if I've ever heard it. Okay, so if we were going to actually address some of these disparities, we're going to have to do it proactively. Prop 16 is super important, and we should be applying those same measures across the board.
Thank you. Kelvin Barrios.
Absolutely. I think this is going to be one of those tools, a very aggressive tool that we can use, but we shouldn't wait until then. We need to ensure that this passes, right? So I'm committed to, alongside my campaign, to campaign for this issue as well and educate the voters of District 9 to ensure that we have that tool. On top of that, it's like, let's be real. It is an issue about race. It is issues about how our regulations and policies were written. We have to be honest with ourselves. Like, this sets us back. This will allow us to build up, to give opportunity on the educational side, on the work side, on the type of jobs, and really allow people of color, the Black community, to lift themselves up, right? To provide these opportunities. I grew up in City Heights. I grew up in City Heights in the 90s. Like, this wasn't a good neighborhood. I love my community, but I understand the issues that we face as people of color are a lot different than other folks face. And 100% in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going to move it over to Kevin. Back to you.
Kevin, you're on mute.
All right, sorry about that. This next one deals with homelessness. According to last year's homeless census, Black people make up less than 6% of the county's population, but 22% of the county's homeless population. How do you plan to equitably address this homeless problem in San Diego? And I'd like to start first with Sean.
Yeah, so this is a super important issue. There's a lot about race that should embarrass San Diego. And I would say that very high on that list should be homelessness. I serve on the regional task force on the homeless, and last month put forward a proposal, or started a conversation around the creation of a task force specifically focused on this issue. Was able to work with a really smart member of the board, Joe Barrett, over the past month to put that together. And then on Thursday, that was unanimously approved. And in the establishment of that task force, I said that it was very clear that, one, we needed to make sure there were non-board members included. That we need to have, there needs to be a majority of Black folks on that committee, and then it needs to be funded. So this is super important. It's an issue that I'm working on. Like I said, it's embarrassing to the city. It should be, at least, that the disparity is what it is. And to think that disparities such as that are anything but a product of systemic racism is, in and of itself, a racist statement.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to Kelvin Barrios. Same question.
It is embarrassing. I think if we look at, what do we have currently right now, right? We don't even have shelters that are open to families or people with disabilities, right? Like homeless individuals, especially people of color, especially Black individuals, they have families, right? Like they could have all hard times, and now they don't have shelter. Also, just look at who is responding to the issues of homelessness. The folks that are communicating, that are getting out there and talking to the individuals, they're not minorities, not people of color. They don't understand what they've been through, or their experiences. Like, we need to do better in that sense. We need to be more sensitive to the type of programming and policies that we are doing as a city, and branch out with nonprofit organizations that are doing the work. Recently, I've been helping out Tasha Williamson, who's working hard to house folks in a motel in Old Town, right? These are people of color, predominantly Black individuals. that are homeless. My campaign donated money. I cooked food and try to donate, and we're now trying to help and see how we can house those individuals. But we need to do more. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe LaCava?
Well, it's a two-pronged attack. One is just a fundamental issue about homelessness. We've got to stop talking. We know what the solution is. It is housing first. We've known about it for years, and we just can't actually implement that. It is another example of others have said about the institutional racism that has taken place. And the whole things that have happened during the pandemic, I think, has just really emphasized that. What's not being talked about is the fact that all the efforts in housing people, moving them into permanent supportive housing, was shifted to focus solely the people that were in the convention center. That is a knee-jerk reaction. The idea that we didn't like how East Village and downtown looked as an appearance and started sweeping the sidewalks. That is a knee-jerk reaction that doesn't take care of the individuals, and as you point out, that are mostly African-American individuals. We have to deal with the problem holistically and get the homeless individuals into permanent supportive housing and give them the support services we need. We also need to get the police out of the job of dealing with homeless individuals and get the county to step up, as they are doing already with caseworkers, so that we can provide the kinds of support that each individual may or may not need. And that'll be the beginning point. But let's do it and stop talking about it. Thank you.
Okay. Will, you're next.
We have a homelessness problem in San Diego to a large extent because we have a housing problem in San Diego. And that housing problem does indeed originate from San Diego's racist segregationist past. We have in places like, I'll go back to Claremont again. I enjoy talking about Claremont. So a red line, a restrictive covenanted neighborhood, folks move in there. Folks still move in. Folks still live there who moved into that neighborhood as a segregated neighborhood. And then if you try to build an apartment complex there, what do you get? You get people, 30, 50 people coming to say, oh, don't change the character of my neighborhood. And I think we need to start recognizing what that code is for what change the character of my neighborhood means when you moved into a segregated community. And I think people should be ashamed to keep saying that. I think that here we have a problem with Black homelessness specifically because we refuse to build new homes in every neighborhood in this town on the basis of what is, sometimes some legitimate complaints about the way you want your neighborhood structured, but is very frequently on the basis of a racial discrimination in people's minds.
Okay, thank you. Stephen.
Well, the district that I am working to represent, District 3, includes downtown and Balboa Park and the neighborhoods all around it. We have by far the highest population of people who are unsheltered in the city, and they are disproportionately Black, and that is a result of the systemic racism that has had outsized impacts on the Black community in any number of different ways. A lot of it has to do with evictions. I support a universal right to counsel to make sure that individuals facing eviction have the opportunity for legal representation funded by the city to ensure that they have their rights preserved. I also believe that among individuals who are homeless, who are unsheltered, we have to make sure that the Black population has an equal opportunity to the services and the resources in the shelter that is available to get them back on their feet.
Okay, thank you. Tony?
Thank you. Joe mentioned this earlier a little bit, but we were all asked by the San Diego Union Tribune to write op-eds about defunding the police and what that would look like. And part of that is talking about how we take money out of the police budget and put it into outreach. We put it into social workers. We put it into mental health care, so we can have person-to-person outreach to folks that are experiencing homelessness, but to also make sure that it's people that someone would trust. We tend to look to the people that look like us when we're looking for help or when we want to accept help, and so we need to have more Black social workers, more Black outreach workers to reach out to the folks that are experiencing homelessness. But really, we need to make sure that we're stopping the whole path from being a Black person to now going into homelessness. We need to have better job equity and address the racism that we have in this city and this country.
Thank you, Tony. Joe Leventhal?
Thank you. I actually decided to run for city council largely because of the homelessness crisis in the region. Every major city in the United States is trying to deal with homelessness. And we sort of pat ourselves on the back in San Diego just because our numbers are status quo while other large cities are going up. But we have to look at the underlying reasons that people are homeless. If you are African American and you lost your job because of a racist employer, we can put you in a house, but if you can't afford it ultimately, that's a problem. If you're a Black veteran and the VA discharged you because of systemic racism there, and you don't have your underlying physical or mental health issues addressed, putting you in a home with a roof over your head when we don't address those underlying issues doesn't get you very far. So I've been a big believer that we need to change the paradigm we look at homelessness through and actually start to really address the harder problem, which is those underlying reasons that people are dealing with on the street.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Marnie?
Yes, I'm really glad to see that, Sean, that you put out with Joe Barrett the proposal for the Regional Task Force on the Homeless to actually look at Black homelessness as a systematic way you make decisions. I was very proud to see that, so I support that wholly. And it's honestly, I think the reason we have a lot more Black folks who are homeless, according to our population, is because of the generations of systematic racism and wealth inequality that Black families have had to experience in our country. It goes back to redlining. It goes back to not being able to get equal education and better jobs. But homelessness in general, we need to stop using our criminal justice system to be our mental health system and to be our drug addiction system. That's honestly what's having a revolving door in including having our police be our first responders to homelessness. I'm actually working with the police to try and make them have a better protocol. And we've actually been working on addressing how police interact with homeless individuals. And so I'm glad to continue doing that on the city council.
All right, thank you, Marnie. Raul?
Sure. So one of the ways I think we need to address why there is such a disparity between the population of San Diego that's African American and the population of the homelessness population that's African American is the fact that many people in the Black community are economically and educationally shut out of opportunities, which means that their overall livelihoods, they're struggling to hang on. And then what comes is over policing of small little issues like an expired driver's license or an expired tag. They get pulled over. They no longer have transportation to their job. They might have to spend a few days in jail if they're subject to a Fourth Amendment waiver from a prior issue that's totally unrelated because they're getting searched and arrested without good cause. I see this as a deputy city attorney, as a prosecutor myself. And that's one of the reasons I became a prosecutor, so that I would be in charge of that file to look at it with a discerning eye to make sure there's more equity, and that over policing leads people into homelessness sometimes.
Okay, thank you, Raul. Noli?
I firsthand experience with the homeless population. I besides volunteering Father Joe and Alpha Project and Solutions for Change, I actually took in a gay Black veteran that was HIV positive in my house for 2.5 years. I got him a job. I got him a place to live. I fed him. And as much as I did for him for 2.5 years, it didn't work because of his mental issues that stopped him from being able to be productive in society. It was heartbreaking. I actually got Taisha Brown, who's my good friend, who is obviously a BAPAC to help out. But until he fixed his mental issues and the things that were going on with him, his drug issues, it wasn't effective. So I'm not a housing first believer. Until you fix internally what's going on with each and every single individual, we can't get people off the streets and into a productive way of living for themselves.
Okay. Thank you. Thank all of you for answering that question. And now I'd like to turn it over to Soleil.
Thank you, Kevin. The need to build affordable housing is a major issue in the city. However, some council districts are having many more affordable housing units being constructed than others, particularly districts 1 through 5 and 7. Do you support building more affordable housing units in your district, and will you support and/or propose streamlining measures to ensure more units get built equitably in all council districts? We're going to start off with Kelvin Barrios.
Yes, actually, we are facing a housing shortage, a housing crisis. We're actually seeing less and less housing be built, right? But at the same time, the housing that is being built, it's luxury apartments, right? So it's not housing for those that need it. It's not housing for our communities. So I welcome development of affordable housing, but at the same time, we need to be tackling the issues of not removing housing that's already affordable, right? So like in my neighborhoods, in City Heights, there's already naturally affordable housing. So we do need to do more on protecting that housing and building along the corridors where we can build affordable housing and have businesses on the bottom and encourage our local economy, our local small business economy to thrive. So I am very supportive of that. I have different action plans revolving around housing and how we can incentivize that and provide incentive-based programs. But at the same time, you know, we need to use the hammer on developers, right? On making sure that they do what is right to our communities and what we need.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, this is really, really important. So seems like a century ago in September of last year when I decided to run for this seat, you know, housing was the top priority. And it's because of my personal experience, you know, of knowing what it's like to be unhoused and seeing the impacts of my family, but also what I see on a day-to-day basis here in San Diego. So we have to build more affordable housing. We're just going to absolutely do that in order to address affordability and homelessness issue. And at the same time, Soleil, it's super important that be distributed throughout the city. The racist zoning practices of the past that Will has mentioned over and over again play a huge role in poverty and perpetuating poverty and perpetuating the lack of access to quality education. And so every single district in the city needs to do it. I'm going to fight like hell to make sure that happens. It's super, super important.
Thank you, Sean. Will?
Well, of course, this is my favorite question because it's the very heart of the campaign. We need to build more housing in every part of our city, and we are still today suffering from structurally racist decisions we made many, many years ago in San Diego. And a lot of our housing policy, a lot of the things that keep us from building new housing are really not necessarily secret, but efforts to preserve the racial disparities that have existed in the past. And we have a lot of people in this town, and frankly, a lot of them are Democrats, committed to keeping our neighborhoods exactly the same as they were in 1955. That is wrong. We need to have affordable housing. We need to have market rate housing. We need to have all housing throughout the system. We need to heavily deregulate the way we have set up our zoning policies. We need to change the way we do fees from by the unit, by the square foot to by the unit, so that we have an incentive to build smaller, more affordable units. We need to have on-site affordable set-asides in condo complexes like mine up here in Carmel Valley. We have a 20% affordable requirement, and that is in the complex. We have 20% of our places being affordable. We don't know who's who because we're just neighbors. That's the way you do affordable, and that's the way you create community without segregation. It's a better way to do it. It's a better way for humans. It's a better way for us as people to all come together as a community, and that's the way we want to move forward.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
Thank you. Joe LaCava?
Yeah, there's a lot of ideas that are being tossed around that I don't think really address the affordability issue, and I think it's time for us to start focusing on what the systemic problem is. It certainly is, just as racism and institutional racism is an embarrassment of our city. The talk we do about the affordability crisis, I think, is comparable to that. I was glad to play a very small part in making sure that source of income was no longer a tool that landlords could use to discriminate. So somebody with a Section 8 voucher could move to any corner of the city next to good schools, next to good jobs. We had an effort to figure out why affordable housing, income restricted housing, is so expensive. That went nowhere. We had an attempt to buy distressed properties during the last housing crisis. It went nowhere. We talk too much and do too little. Someone mentioned about the Midway opportunity to rebuild that neighborhood. That's an opportunity for the city to leverage its power to actually create more housing than just the lousy 10% that we keep talking about. We have some real opportunities, but only if we sit down, work collaboratively with all the stakeholders together to really start tackling what the solution is. The last thing I'll say, I was the only one who showed up when Chris Ward said permanent supportive housing should be equally distributed across the city. I was there in support.
Thank you, Joe. Tony Duran?
We absolutely need to have more housing built in every neighborhood of San Diego. You know, we do have neighborhoods that are outside of District 3 that don't have the same focus for building, for affordable building, you know, mid-range, and it's because of you know, redlining that we had. You know, how long ago was that? It's also the red tape that we're looking at too. We have seen that when we need to do something because it's affecting more people, and it's affecting more people that haven't necessarily faced struggle before, that when that happens, we can do something quicker. We can make things happen at a faster pace. But when we have community members that are lower income, that are Black, that are brown, we don't move as quickly for them. And so we absolutely need to streamline this process, get the housing built that we need in San Diego on all levels, and let's get our people housed.
Thank you, Tony. Stephen Whiteburn?
Sure. Affordable housing needs to be distributed throughout the city, but I also think that District 3, which includes downtown, can be a particular part of the solution to San Diego's affordable housing crisis. Downtown, we can build to 40 stories. Downtown is the transit hub where you want a lot of your income restricted housing to be close to transit. So we can do a lot downtown. We could do a lot on the El Cajon Boulevard corridor, which has 3 lanes in each direction. It's a transit corridor. It's largely 2-story multifamily right now. And by affordable housing, I want to be clear that I'm talking about income restricted housing. You know, affordable can be a broad term, but we need to be sure that we're building housing for the lowest income residents in San Diego. I also think that the state proposal, and one that's been talked about in San Diego, of purchasing motels to you know, provide affordable housing or house the homeless, is another way that we can advance this. And lastly, I'll just say that there are some real good incentive programs in Seattle, Portland, New York, Minneapolis that have resulted in proactive creation of affordable housing by developers, and we should pursue those here in San Diego.
Thank you. Marnie?
Yes, this is a great question about housing affordability throughout the city. I'm actually in close communication with our school board up at Poway Unified and our teachers to monitor what's going on with our schools. And they've told me that we had thousands of students who were homeless in Poway Unified last year. And people don't see it as much because they think of District 5 as a place where you don't have homelessness, but we do. One thing I think we really need to do is make sure that everyone who works in our city can afford to live here. I mean, I am a city employee. I know what it's like to try and make ends meet here. I want to make sure our teachers can afford to live here. Our firefighters, our police officers, if we want community policing, let's let them afford housing here as well. In addition to building affordable housing, buying a home is how we have generational wealth in our country. We need to do a better job with first-time home buyer programs. Why can't people like teachers afford to buy homes? Why don't we help with first-time down payment assistance and get folks into homes where we need to? And finally, it's also a health and environmental justice issue. Affordable housing should have electric vehicle charging stations and solar built into it, just like we do in other communities too. So thank you.
Thank you, Marnie. Joe Leventhal?
Thank you. I agree. District 5 needs more affordable housing. It needs more mid-market housing. It's not necessarily the most popular position in constituents in District 5, but frankly, I talk to a lot of business owners who their number one complaint has been their ability to retain workers. And when I talk to them about the importance of making sure their workforce can actually live near where they work, it clicks. They realize the importance of having housing where people work. So I certainly support more affordable housing, market rate housing in District 5. I do think that my policies support home ownership. Part of the reason I've been endorsed by the San Diego Association of Realtors, Pacific Southwest Association of Realtors. Homeownership is important. It's important for wealth legacy and pass that on. And obviously, the Black community has been, as we've all said, historically disadvantaged because of racist policies in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Noli Souza?
My passion for affordable housing goes all the way back to 25 years when I worked at Bayside Community Center in the Housing Resource Center that the School of Law operated in Linda Vista, where I worked with low-income residents and helped them with their housing and legal issues and prevent them from being taken advantage of by unscrupulous landlords and tenants, and making sure that we had enough affordable housing in Linda Vista. This goes all the way till now, where I've been chairman of the Linda Vista Planning Group for the last 6 years, where we demand we'll take as much affordable housing in my community in Linda Vista. You'll find very few neighborhoods in in San Diego that will accept affordable housing, and we've done that. There was a Community Housing Works was building a project in our community that was going to demolish 16 units. And so what I did, I come up with a solution, because those 16 homeowners are upset they're going to lose their homes in place of this 98 units. And I said, I went to the Housing Commission, why can't we change this policy and say that these 16 homeowners with their children can stay in the community when these 98 units get built, as long as they income qualify? And that's what I've been advancing. I've been passionate about it, and this is going to be one of my top priorities.
Thank you, Noli. Raul?
Hi, yeah, thanks. I absolutely agree that affordable housing units in each district shouldn't just be an aspiration. It should be part of the checklist. And streamlining measures to help developments put them in is important, but there has to be hooks on that contract. So if we're going to streamline permits for a developer, if we're going to give them a preferential path to developing and saying you're going to do affordable housing, it can't just be that you're going to have a certain income requirement, saying 60% set aside for 50% of area median income. We have to demand in the ordinance that gives them the permits and permission to build that they can't require 2 to 3 months of rent or an $80,000 a year yearly income or $2,000 deposit to get through the door. That's a systemic barrier that prevents people of all colors, really, but fundamentally communities of color from getting the housing near where they work, especially in District 7, when we're on the Green Line, we could have transit-oriented housing. We need to make sure that requirement's in place. It's not just enough to say 60 set aside. There's got to be implements in the leases.
Thank you. Thank you all for answering that. And I'm going to go ahead and give it over to Kevin for our next question.
Okay, this question has 2 parts to it, but there have been several studies from San Diego State University, Campaign Zero, and the statewide Racial and Identity Profiling Act Board, RIPA, that have found racial and identity disparities in San Diego police practices. In particular, in 2019, Campaign Zero report found that the San Diego Police Department was 23% more likely to conduct consent searches on Black people and 60% more likely to conduct consent searches on Latino people than white people, despite these groups being less likely to be found with contraband. Similar disparities were found in police stops, use of force, and arrest rates. Now here's the 2 parts. 1, A, do you believe that there is a bias policing problem in San Diego? This would require just a yes or no. And the second part of the question is, please share how you would address the findings of these studies. And we'd start with Stephen.
Well, to answer the first question, yes. I mean, there is clearly a structural bias in policing in San Diego. It not only has it manifested itself in traffic stops and searches, but even with the COVID-19 enforcement, a disproportionate number of the tickets have been written to people who are Black. So the structural bias is unquestionable. How do we address it? I mean, we have to really demand that our police department, go through the proper training so that officers understand and come to terms in many cases with their own implicit biases and are able to be cautious about that. And we have to continue to compile the statistics and use those statistics and take advantage of the new Office on Race and Equity to really get to the root of why we're continuing to see this and finally make a dent in the racial disparities that exist in policing in San Diego today.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Tony?
Absolutely, there's a bias. We're a racist society. We see that. It's been more prevalent. It's been more in our faces, where we're forced to finally see it when so many of us have had their eyes closed. Part of what we need to do, part of it's all part of the defunding the police ideas. There are things that are under the purview of the police that should not be. But another thing we need to look at, the fact that qualified immunity is still here in our state. My good friend, Representative Leslie Herod, just passed, it only took her 16 weeks to pass police accountability in the state of Colorado. And for the first time, it's like qualified immunity is not a thing for them. So it's not just a matter of training. You can train all you want, give somebody a certificate, you went through the training, so you're no longer racist. So you no longer have biases. When that doesn't work, we need to remove these police officers from service, period.
Thank you. Okay, Marnie?
Yes, especially as a white person who wants to be an ally to communities of color, I think it's important for us to acknowledge that racism exists everywhere in society. And, I went on a ride along with some police officers in Northeastern Division in my community, and we responded to a severe mental health crisis in Rancho Bernardo, and I watched the police de-escalate a situation in an amazing way to make sure nobody got hurt. And that's what I want to see citywide. Every community should have access to ethical, responsible policing, and we should put in the funds and training necessary to support that citywide. So I'm glad that we're talking about this. We need to also make sure we're funding mental health and addiction treatment so that our police don't have to be the first responders to every crisis. And that's one of the reasons I'm suing the opioid industry on behalf of the city of San Diego, is to get money back so we can actually do those programs. So.
Okay, thank you. Joe Leventhal?
Yeah, I agree that there's a bias across our entire justice system. I've talked about that. I mentioned it in my op-ed to the San Diego Union Tribune. After Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, Missouri, I led a conference for our federal judges that talked about implicit bias, talked about racism and bias in our charging decisions. I think we need to look at things like our overall justice system and how many Black men are incarcerated and how that tears apart Black families. The way we address this is we've got to keep our eye on the ball. I mean, it's not something that's going to change tomorrow. We've been talking about this and trying to solve these issues for decades, and we need to continue to examine these issues and try and find ways that we can root out that racism in our system.
Okay, thank you. Raul?
Yes, so I think that of all the people running for city council, I probably have more personal experience understanding and analyzing this problem through my role as a prosecutor, because so much of my time is spent watching body-worn camera and understanding the individual cases and seeing the conclusions you can draw from that. And what I see is that there's a reciprocal relationship between policing and prosecuting, where prosecutors demand a fourth waiver for even the smallest infractions, so that for a 3-year probationary period, I don't know why 3 is the standard, but it needs to be lessened, because it doesn't make sense that someone has given up their Fourth Amendment rights to be searched reasonably for 3 years by police officers. So when a police officer comes up on a person that they recognize has this Fourth Amendment waiver, they can be stopped, searched, and in issues like that, those stops often lead to uses of force. If you don't stop, you can be charged with a resisting arrest. It's a reciprocal relationship. We got to fix both ends.
Okay, thank you. Noli, you're next.
Yes, there is a bias in, but what are we going to do about it? I came up with solutions. I'm all about solutions. So what I did was come up with this new idea. It's kind of a crazy idea. It's called the Law Officer Training Corps, kind of the police officer equivalent of the ROTC, where we give young adults the opportunity to go to college. We cover their college expenses. And in the meantime, when they're in college, become community service officers and take over the administrative responsibilities away from sworn officers, so sworn officers can concentrate on actually solving and preventing crime. So I've talked with 3 police chiefs, including the present one. They thought this is a great idea, including a president of a major university here in San Diego, Dr. James Harrison at USD. So we got to bring this to our college campus. And this is how we get rid of that bias, is that we train and we come up with new ways to train our next generation of police officers. And what happens when they graduate? They go back to their home communities and work in those communities because they've already built the trust and the relationships where they grew up. So please read more about it. I think you'll love it.
Okay, thank you, Nolan. Sean, you're next.
Yes, I mean yes, there is so much bias. I mean, the story that was published in the Voice of San Diego earlier this week, I think said a lot. And it didn't surprise anyone who follows this issue that there have been a lot more citations issued for coronavirus-related offenses and other issues during the COVID-19 crisis. That wasn't surprising at all. What I was surprised to see is the admission in that piece by the police department that they haven't changed anything, that these disparities were not the result of a change in practices, but just the continuation of practices in the past. So that exhibits the biases that exist in terms of what we're going to do about it. You know, one, police are just doing way too much. We've talked a lot about the diminishing the role of police. Where folks do work, they will find things to do. Police are there to stop people. They end up stopping people. So we need to limit the role of policing, and then obviously acknowledging this bias is super important.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Kelvin?
The first part, yes, there is a bias. I think, honestly, on a personal level, I didn't need a study to know that. Like I grew up in City Heights. I was probably stopped as a teenager, as a young adult by the police probably a dozen times. I had spotlights put on me while walking home in a hoodie, asking me where I'm going, being pulled over when I used to be a mechanic and getting off work, getting pulled over for no real reason, just getting a warning, just checking in on me. These are real issues, and they sometimes lead to negative consequences for individuals. We need to do better. I think we need to, improve community policing, and it's really about the officers that are interacting with our community. We need folks that look like us. We need officers that speak the different languages of our community, so there isn't a language barrier. And we do need to shift funds away from the police department into certain job duties that they shouldn't really be doing. Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you, Kelvin. Joe LaCava, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. Simple answer, yes, there is both explicit and implicit bias in the department. And the first step in solving the problem is admitting that you have a problem, which we have not yet seen across the police department. This issue has been going on, as other people have said, for many, many years, and now it's finally getting that overdue attention, and maybe it gives us that extraordinary moment to make some extraordinary changes. But let's not forget that the SDSU study offered recommendations that the previous administration did not take into effect. I served in the Police Community Relations Board as vice chair to Barry Pollard, and we brought that back a second time, and the administration did not take advantage of it. We brought it back a third time, and the administration did not take advantage of it. What we need is a new generation of folks that are willing to admit that there is this institutional racism, and we're going to step up and do something about it. Our board also issued a report last year that talked about racial profiling, that talked about stopping pretext stops, that talked about stopping curbing. And yet the department has not done anything about it. This mayor has not done anything about it. We need a new generation. Training helps, but it is not the solution. There has to be an admission and a commitment to change. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Will Moore?
I mean, nobody doesn't think we have a bias problem who pays attention to Southern California over the last 100 years at all. We have, however, not admitted, and we do need a new generation that admits what the real problem is. We have not admitted to ourselves that we have a police force that's just doing what we tell them to do. We have laws that are designed to keep parts of our community in their place. And we have, they passed all these laws on vagrancy and loitering back in the day. We have right now jaywalking. We have these little quality of life laws that allow us to, stop somebody when they're walking through a neighborhood where they maybe look a little bit out of place. We have citizens that call the police when they see somebody they don't know in their neighborhood. We got people posting on Nextdoor about, oh, I don't recognize that guy. He shouldn't be here. Our police, we need to recognize, do what we tell them to do. And who is we? We are the government of the city of San Diego, the city council, and the voters. And we need to recognize that our entire system, as Raul pointed out with the 3 years on the Fourth Amendment searches, is geared towards keeping people economically out of competition with the folks that are already at the top. And we need to fix that first. We talk about all these training and these recommendations from these committees like, oh, police should wave to people more and nonsense like that. That's not going to solve our problem. We need to stop making the police, send the police out there to do our racial dirty work, because they know that that's what they're doing. And they get, if you're an officer and you get sent out to do that job and somehow it's then your fault that you do the job in the way that the system is prescribed that you do it. And then you said, oh, you need to go to a training, a sensitivity training. Well, that just makes,
Thank you, Will.
That's just a training for making you do your job in a way that makes people less uncomfortable about what you're actually trying to accomplish.
Okay, we'd like to turn it over to Brian now.
Thank you, Kevin. I know that it's 2 o'clock. If you all don't mind, we have a few more questions. If everyone doesn't mind sticking around for a little bit longer. If the Commission on Police Practices wins at the ballot box in November, what will you do to ensure implementation of police oversight? We'll start off with Will Moore.
I think the commission is going to be, there are a lot of things that were left kind of on the cutting room floor to be determined. The budget of the commission needs to be sufficiently robust that it can actually do its job. We need to make sure we don't have those rules that gum it up with, you have to look at every case, and you're going to have to have some discretion in how deep you dig into each individual case. One of the things they did at the county, the mistakes they made, where they said you have to analyze every single case, and that bogged down the system to the point where nothing ultimately got analyzed. You need those recommendations to come before the city council. We as the council are also going to need to see the results of those investigations. And I think that really the budgeting decisions are probably the biggest one.
Thank you. Joe LaCava?
Sure, great question, because we've seen too often that these good ideas get bogged down in the bureaucracy and become essentially ineffective. It obviously starts with who gets appointed to the commission, people that are actually committed. I think a lot of the folks on the current CRB are actually committed to do their job, but they're hamstrung by the way the rules and the regulations are. So the appointments to that commission is going to be the first step. The second thing that, again, is really and my colleague mentioned it, the rules of how they operate and the funding that they need to actually do the job. This is a tough time, no doubt, with the pandemic and the impact on our city budget, but we have to be serious. This is a moment in time for us to take extraordinary steps to address the issues that we're finally confronting, and that commission, when it passes in November, will be one more step in the right direction. Thank you.
Moving on to Tony Duran.
One of the things that we need to make sure is, a lot of these commissions that we see at the city level, on the county level, we see a lot of the same people filling those positions. We need to make sure that we're expanding that out so more people are reached out to in all of our communities. So people that haven't always had a voice, or who haven't felt that they've had a voice, can sit on these commissions and can help make these decisions. We also need to make sure that that as council members, we're really being held accountable. Also, make sure that we're not people that are not as accountable to the community, but more accountable to the police officer unions. You know, we need to make sure that we're making the best decisions for our communities, not wait for an outside organization to tell us that it's okay to support something or it's okay to say yes or no to something. So it needs to be much more community engagement and reaching deeper into our communities so more voices are heard.
Thank you. Stephen?
I've endorsed this measure. The measure will be on the ballot in November, and if it passes, the new city council will be seated in December and should get right to work on making sure that this is implemented, making sure that there is a robust recruitment process for the new committee members, making sure that it is adequately funded to do what it is intended to do and what the proponents have sought to have accomplished. And we have to make sure ultimately that the work of the commission is respected, because after all, it is an advisory commission, and that advice won't have the effect necessary unless you have council members who will listen and take that advice seriously to advance racial justice in the city.
Thank you. Marnie?
Yes, I also support the ballot measure, and I'm committed to helping it get off the ground once it's passed and once City Council gets sworn in. You know, this is an opportunity for us to rebuild trust in our community between our police officers and the people that they serve. And I'm committed to having an open and transparent dialogue about how we get the review commission up and staffed and running, and working with everyone to create a better community for all of us. You know, I think one of the things we've seen in our country is a national leader who wants to divide us and foster anger and hatred. And so I think this is an opportunity for San Diego to reverse that and say, no, we're going to work together and we're going to embrace our diversity and embrace our communities and make a better San Diego for all of us.
Thank you. Joe?
I also support the measure, and I agree with what's been said earlier. I think the appointments and the budget are two really important roles that the city council is going to play in making sure that's an effective review board. I also love what I see with these 10 candidates. We're all seeming very active in terms of wanting to see change, and that's part of why I ran for city council, because I feel like the council's traditionally been reactive and not proactive. And we saw a lot of community activism, obviously, after George Floyd's murder. But we shouldn't wait for something like that so dramatically to happen in San Diego for our city council to take action and change the way things are done. And hopefully this next city council will really look at what comes out of that review board and not treat those things necessarily as one-off, but really see if there are larger issues that need to be addressed.
Thank you. Noli?
Yes, I support the measure, but yeah, the biggest thing is making sure that it's funded. I mean, we're going to, sometimes as candidates, be careful what we ask for if we get elected, because we're going to face some really tough budgetary decisions when it comes before us, regards to making decisions on whether to fund. But we have to make this commission funded. We have to make it a priority, and we have to make sure that we take the recommendations seriously. I've been on. I've been on three city boards and a planning group, and we're all advisory. Sometimes I don't know whether they listen to our advice, but we got to make sure that this new board has some teeth, and that the city council members, I will take their recommendations very seriously, and we all need to. And that's my commitment that I make.
Thank you. Roll.
Thanks. This is an incredibly important aspect of changing the model of policing in San Diego. I'm proud to have supported this measure at various clubs from the time it was being crafted, in my op-ed on policing in the Union Tribune. When it comes to the budget needing to be robust enough, we need to be able to put the commissioners in a position to do a national search for an executive director and experienced investigators and analysts, because that's going to be the model that we want to set for the country. If we want San Diego to be a model for systemic change everywhere, we need to make sure that this commission can live up to its goals and its mission. And so the city oftentimes underpays city employees, and oftentimes scrimps on benefits and all the sorts of things that recruits and retains the best employees to do stuff. And so I think that part of the budget means making sure we have a national search so that we can really show other cities that we're on top of it.
Thank you. Kelvin?
I think I'm in full support of this. I'm publicly in support of the independent commission. We need transparency, but we also need, if we're fortunate enough to be elected, is take the advice that we get out of this commission seriously. For me, I commit to always advocate to add to my budget priorities that this commission is fully funded with the necessary tools and necessary funding sources so that it is effective. It's like let's be honest, like we're facing tough budget years, but this is one of those things, one of those departments that we cannot compromise on, and we need to ensure that they have the funding to do their work and to do what they're intended to. I really don't want to see this lose focus or anything like that. So I do make that commitment that every year I will advocate for this so that it meets its funding goal.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, so super excited that this is going to be headed to the ballot. Prior to my role at Youth Will, I was a director at Mid-City Can, which was one of the organizations that, with their youth council, that really helped push for this. This is a long time overdue. This is super, super important. I'm very much in support of it. I think the idea about funding, making sure that that's done adequately is very important, and also making sure that it has true community representation in terms of who's sitting there, and that we don't use racist practices to disenfranchise those who could be a very valuable voice at that table. A very quick addition, I think that just having an approach of radical transparency is very important. Several years back when the city was hiring a new police chief, we got involved in advocating for that, making sure that was an open and transparent process. In the midst of our first meeting about that process, the mayor's office released a press release dictating what the process would be, which was a great example that is already baked. They had no interest in transparency, and we pushed back against that. This is the work that I do in the community. I'm completely committed to this. We got to get this right.
Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Soleil for audience questions. We have time for 2. Soleil, you can take it over.
Thank you, Brian. So we have had 2 audience questions submitted. There has been a lot of feedback, and we're going to allow 45 seconds for each candidate to go ahead and answer the following. The first question is going to be, the present proposed PLAs or the removal on the city ban of PLAs did not get the full support of District 4, who paused in looking to have unions to do more for them. The past failed PLAs that have failed Black contractors and Black workers, and the fact that the district is the home of the National Black Contractors Association. What would you do to make this change? And we're going to go ahead and start with Marnie.
Yes, so this is the ballot measure that would rescind what used to be Prop A in the city to, we have a ban on using what are called product labor agreements on a lot of different city-funded infrastructure projects. So we actually don't have PLAs in the city right now. And so that's something I think is a point of confusion that needs to be cleared up. I think in general that labor does need to be inclusive of everyone, and not just Black community, but also women. We need to make sure that everyone has an equal chance at the table to get the infrastructure jobs that we need to get our city up and running again. You know, infrastructure and public works is going to be a big restart of our economy. And so making sure everyone has a seat at a table is an important thing to me.
Thank you. Joe Leventhal.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I addressed this earlier. Again, I mean, I think that with over 85% of the workforce is non-union, project labor agreements, unfortunately, really tip the scales in favor of unions and union workers. And so, again, that's generally why I agree with the current law. I don't believe that we should reinstate project labor agreements. We already have an exception to our municipal code if we are not eligible for state funds because it would require a project labor agreement. We are allowed to enter into a project labor agreement in the city as the current law stands. So I don't see a need to change the law, and I think it makes the most even playing field for all involved.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Noli?
Yeah, I'd like to echo Joe Leventhal's sentiments. I'm against project labor agreements. I think they're anti-competitive. 85% of the workforce is non-labor, non-union, but not membership of unions. And so I believe in a fair and open competition to get public works contracts.
Thank you. Raul?
Yeah, no, this is incredibly important, and I know it's important to not just District 4, but all the different districts. You know, PLAs aim to make sure that we have the local hire and we're able to target specific zip codes of where to hire. Those are great goals, right? But as we've been saying, every institution in our society has to look inward and say, what have we been doing to perpetuate systemic barriers? And I believe that that labor unions, building trades are taking a hard look at that. And also, to another issue, a way to address this is that if we are to pass Prop 16 so that we can, have affirmative action throughout the state of California, we're going to be able to really address this directly and head on as city councilors.
Thank you. And then Kelvin Barrios.
I think this conversation needs to continue on. I'm aware of some of the issues that have been brought by the Black Contractors Association, and some of these things are valid. It's like we have PLAs are actually a good thing. They're great things for our communities to be able to hire locally, to be able to incentivize that workforce, to make sure that our workforce is properly trained. But we need to do better. We need, yes, there aren't any PLAs right now with the city of San Diego. If we can get there, I want to see the city be inclusive. We need to have the tough conversations amongst labor and the contract association on how to get there, and so that we can come to the table together. And I do believe that is possible. I think it got close this time, and I commit to working on this issue.
Thank you, Kelvin. Sean?
Yeah. So, Kelvin mentioned PLAs, and I think Raul said it as well, PLAs should do a lot of good. However, if an institution has, as all do, has allowed racism to permeate within it, and anything that we pass helps perpetuate that, we're part of the problem. And so this is going to be a really tough conversation between folks who support the labor movement, but need to see some real changes happen within, some real tough, honest conversations, and not just the conversations, folks, action, right? So what are we doing to actually change the presence of systemic and institutional racism, even amongst our allies? And so until that happens, I think that it's good that we hit pause, right? Because the last thing that we need to do is pass things to perpetuate racist practices.
Thank you, Sean. Will Moore?
The PLA ban passed in 1992, when there had never been a PLA previously in the city of San Diego anyway, was a right-wing project of an individual named Carl DeMaio, who was a talk show host, whose mission is to depress the wages of people in the city of San Diego. I would support a clean PLA repeal. I don't think that anybody is blameless in the entire world, but I do think that we need to get away from the things that have set us against each other in the past and move forward so people make good wages. So when you build affordable housing, the people building that affordable housing aren't getting wages that qualify them as low wage for affordable housing. We need to do better in this town. We need to move away from the right-wing Nixon's lucky city ideologies that we've had in the past. And PLAs did not create our structural problem because they've never existed in San Diego. That's not one of our original sins here. There are a lot of others, but that's not one of them. I think some folks on the other side here have done a very good job of trying to divide us into little groups so we can be set up against each other so that working people can be paid less. And I think that's what's going on. I think it's very disappointing.
Thank you, Will. Joe LaCava?
Yeah, great question. Since it's not going to be on the ballot, but it is kind of that classic "So San Diego" where we spend so much time talking about these things, and then the average San Diegan goes, "I mean, you're not solving my problem. You're having these great political debates, but what are you doing for me?" If 85% of the workforce is not union, then a lot of those folks are not having the worker protection, the prevention of wage theft, actually getting the wages that you can afford to live here in San Diego. And so there is a larger conversation. When we talk about dealing with institutional racism, it has to go across the board. The labor unions, government, police departments, every segment of our society has to rethink what we have created up to this point and how we're going to pivot to ensure every race, every San Diegan is really enjoying the opportunity that we have here in San Diego. And I've seen a lot of progress in the labor unions. I've had a lot of conversations with the lifeguard union who are endorsing me on this topic as well. And so I see a new generation of elected officials that are going to be able to tackle that head on. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And then Tony Duran.
Yeah, I have supported PLAs in the past, and it's actually enlightening to hear some of the conversation that's happening even amongst our own candidates here, bringing to light some of the issues that could be associated with that. The most important thing is to make sure that we're having these jobs, we're growing more jobs in San Diego for San Diegans, because we need to make sure that our people here in our own city are being taken care of, but also to make sure that the pay is equitable and the pay is right and just. Too often, there's a lot of money made off of building, but there's not a lot of income for our folks that are doing the hard work, making sure that these buildings are being made. So
Thank you, Tony.
We need to address that better.
Thank you. And then Stephen Whitburn.
Well, I'm a former union member myself, and I'm a strong supporter of the labor movement because when I was a union member, I got better wages than I otherwise would. I got good health care. And the idea behind the labor movement is to advance economic justice for all communities, to advance social justice. And I think by and large, the labor movement has accomplished that in many areas to some degree. And I think that PLAs are a part of that, because you're providing people with better wages, you're hiring people locally, you are in fact, helping businesses in many cases by ensuring that there is labor peace and that there aren't strikes. So I think that PLAs can do a lot of good. But I think that we need to make sure that everybody is eligible to participate, including, of course, Black contractors and including people who are not members of unions themselves.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you all. We are not able to get to the second audience question due to time constraints. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Brian to close us out.
Thank you. We're going to close this out. If the candidates can hold themselves to 30 seconds for their closing statements, that would be great. We'll start off with Kelvin Barrios.
I want to first off thank all of you for organizing this. This has actually been a really good experience, seeing the viewpoints of all the different candidates, and for the audience to see the viewpoints of all the different candidates. So thank you for having us. I look forward to continuing these conversations. For anyone that would like to reach out to me, my email is kelvin@kelvinbarrios.com. Talk to me about issues, talk to me about any concerns. I'm here to listen, I'm here to learn. And again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Sean?
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting this. I think we're at an incredible moment of opportunity here, but it's also a dangerous one. We've seen so often in the past as movements have been co-opted and the language of change has been co-opted and watered down. And I worry that some of that might be happening right now. Folks who've never talked about systemic racism or systemic injustice are now using those words. We cannot let this moment slip away from us. We need to aggressively pursue racial justice and equity. That's one of the reasons I'm running for office. I appreciate the opportunity to have for this forum, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe?
Which Joe?
Leventhal, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Didn't want to step on Joe LaCava's toes. First,
right.
Thank you, BayPAC. Thank you, BayPAC, for organizing this. If you want to know more about me or my campaign, go to joeforsandiego.com. joeforsandiego.com. I feel like the city is going to be in great hands. This is really a great group, and I'm very committed to the issues I've talked about today, whether I'm elected or not. I'm a proud BayPAC member now, and look forward to continuing the dialogue. So again, thank you for hosting this.
Thank you, Marnie.
Yeah, thank you, BayPAC, for hosting. I'm proud to be a BayPAC member as well. And thank you for bringing us all together. I think that the Black voice in San Diego in politics needs to be heard louder than ever, and we've ignored it for way too long. So I really appreciate you having me here today. My website is marnieforsandiego.com, and we would love to have the conversation continue. Please reach out. I'd love to reach out to you as well and keep educating us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Noli?
Thanks for having me, my BayPAC family. I've been involved with BayPAC since 2016 when Elise Pipkin Allen introduced me to it, and I've loved the organization since. I think you've heard, what I can do for San Diego, my ideas, my record of service, and I'm tired. Everybody's tired of politicians just talking, but I'm a man of action, and I've walked the walk, and not just talked the talk. And if you elect me, you're going to see some real change. Status quo is unacceptable to me, and I intend to implement change. And my ear is always open to BayPAC. You all have been such great advisors to me, and it will continue so when I get elected to City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Raul?
Thank you so much to BayPAC for giving us the forum to be able to talk today. I really appreciate your mission, and I think that your mission and my mission align. I had a really good job as a civil attorney before moving home to San Diego and joining the city attorney's office, but I specifically joined the criminal division because I knew that we needed the voices of Black and Brown communities heard in those rooms at the prosecutor's desks. And that's why, taking that leap into public service was so important to me. And so every single case I look at, I say, it's my brother, I'm my brother's keeper, I'm my sister's keeper, and I need to do justice case by case, person by person. And so I made that step into public service, and now running for city council to take all the things I've learned and seeing how social, economic, educational, criminal justice concerns need to be put together in one comprehensive whole. I really hope I can have all the people listening here support. My name is Raul Campillo. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Will Moore?
I'm so grateful for this opportunity to come in front of, the community that I grew up in, that I'm from, that I advocate in spaces where, those voices don't get heard. Things like I gave a Black Lives Matter speech to my Rotary Club in La Jolla Golden Triangle in 2015. And those voices, bringing my ability to bring that voice from the community I'm from into the community that I have spent the last decade and a half is very important to me. It is central to my mission in life. And so my activities in San Diego, my leadership in San Diego have been extensive over the past 15 years. Co-founder of San Diego Leadership Alliance, the American Constitution Society chapter here, the Urban League Young Professionals, chair of the Consolidated Plan Advisory Board, board member of my Rotary Club, the Democratic Party's attorney here in town, the fight for leadership on the Fight for 15 fight, giving legal advice to numerous nonprofits, and that has earned me the support and endorsement of a wide array from Republicans like Mr. Jerry Sanders, our former mayor, to all the way to Lorena Gonzalez. And that's because they've seen my leadership. They've seen that I don't take any flack, that I go straight at the issues, and I try to figure out what the real thing is rather than just dress it up so that to get it off to the side. I hope to have everybody's support here, and I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Joe?
Well, thank you to BayPAC, and thank you to the moderators. You ran a great program. It was very ambitious, and I think you pulled it off very, very well. And I hope there's a big audience to see this. Joe Lacava running for District 1, Barbara Bree's seat. I'm running because I have worked inside the City Hall. That's where my public service as a volunteer was about. I've seen how much wasted potential there has been. That's what's motivated me to run. Government is where we can come together to solve the mutual problems. But I also understand that I have to listen to the people with the lived experience. I have to listen to people who know what the problems are and begin to understand what the solutions are. And then my job is to amplify that through my role as a council member and actually do the implementation, whether it's budget or policy or regulations. That's how we start to affect change. I love the people who understand that we have a unique moment in time and we will not waste that time. I appreciate, again, the conversation. I hope to earn your individual support going forward. Stay safe out there. We got a long way to go on this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony?
Thank you so much, BayPAC. I can't think of a better way to spend my birthday than to spend it with you all today, this afternoon. So thanks for having us all. I also want to say that as the only woman of color running for a city council seat, we have 5 city council seats open right now. I'm the only woman of color. We only have 2 women. We have no Black candidates running for city council. And I think we need to really bring that up, especially in this particular setting, but also outside of this. We need to make sure that we're recruiting more people of color, we're recruiting more women, and not just talking about how we need to support. We need to support women, we need to support people of color, we need to support Black people. We need to do this, not just to say it, but to, I almost cussed, but to actually do it. And I just want to say that, again, thank you. I'm going to be going through the chat in the Facebook page to answer questions. And TonyForSanDiego.com, please reach out. I would love to have your support and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll wrap up with Stephen.
Thank you. Well, happy birthday, Tony. And thank you to everyone for your interest in these campaigns, including my campaign to represent downtown and Balboa Park and the neighborhoods all around it. Congratulations to BayPAC on an excellent forum this afternoon. At the top of the program, you mentioned how we lost Congressman John Lewis, icon of the civil rights movement. And I know that all of us here participating in this forum and everybody watching this forum today want to continue his legacy and end racial inequities once and for all. And you can count on me to work toward that on the San Diego City Council. You could find me at whitburnforcouncil.com. Thank you.
Thank you. I am going to turn it over to BayPAC Vice Chair Elise Pipkin-Allen to close us out, to give us our closing words. If you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Byron. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, great. I really want to thank all of the candidates that turned out today. I want to thank you for spending 2.5 hours with us and for your preparation and for your responses. I feel certain that all of the people listening will have, number one, they're going to have a very hard choice to make. They're going to have a hard choice to make. But I know that they're going to leave this forum with more knowledge than they had in the past, and that they will be great informed voters. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to thank our former committee. I want to thank the listeners. I want to thank the people the subject matter experts who gave us these great questions. And I hope that next month, on the 3rd Saturday of next month, we will be doing something for the Board of Supervisors, and that our audience will come and participate with us. Some important things, the census. Because of COVID-19, they have extended the census to October 31st. If you have not completed your paperwork for the census, I would really encourage you to do so. The census is $1,000 that comes back to our state for every person that completes the census, so it's extremely important. And I also want to encourage everybody to vote. I watched something on TV last night out in Portland, Oregon. They had some people who were law enforcement people from some place that nobody knew. They had on masks, they had guns, they were hurting people. And if things like that don't get people to the polls, I kind of don't know what will. So I encourage you to vote. I encourage you to complete the census. I also want to thank the people that collaborated with us, all of the other organizations. It's been great. I hate to say this because I'm a BayPAC member, but BayPAC does good work. And as John Lewis says, let's go and make good trouble. Thank you again. Back to you, Brian.
Thank you all. That concludes this forum. I thank everyone for being here. Thank the audience, subject matter experts. As Elise said, thank the candidates for showing up. I don't want to take up any more of your time. You all have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, BayPAC. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, take care.
Stay safe out there.
You guys are
All
great.
right. Take care.
Okay.